In 1991, two hikers in the Alps stumbled across a body frozen in the ice. They assumed it was a mountaineer who had died sometime in the last few decades. They were wrong by more than 5,000 years. The body was around 5,300 years old, one of the oldest and best-preserved humans ever found. And the more scientists studied him, the clearer one thing became. This was not a man who simply froze to death. This was a murder victim. This is the story of Otzi the Iceman and the oldest cold case ever solved. It was September 1991, high in the Otzi Alps on the border between Austria and Italy. A German couple, hiking off the main path, spotted something brown sticking out of the melting ice. At first, they thought it was rubbish. Then, they realized they were looking at a human head and shoulders, face down in the meltwater. Assuming it was a recent climbing accident, authorities recovered the body roughly, even damaging it, before anyone understood what they actually had. Because this body hadn't been in the ice for years. It had been there since the Copper Age. The ice had done something extraordinary. It had frozen and dried the body, preserving it as a natural mummy. Skin, organs, even the contents of his stomach. They named him Otzi, after the Otzi Valley where he was found. He was a man in his mid-40s, short and lean, with brown eyes and worn joints, old for his time. His body was covered in more than 60 tattoos, simple lines and crosses, many placed over his joints and lower back, possibly an early form of pain treatment. He was remarkably equipped. He carried a bow, a quiver of arrows, a flint dagger, and a fire-starting kit. And, most striking of all, a copper axe, a rare and valuable tool that marked him as someone of status. Remember that axe. It matters later. For 10 years, most researchers believed Otzi had simply died of exhaustion or cold, caught out by bad weather high on the mountain. It was a peaceful, if lonely explanation. And it was completely wrong. In 2001, a routine X-ray of the body revealed something no one had noticed. There was a foreign object buried deep in his left shoulder. An arrowhead. Someone had shot Otzi in the back. The stone arrowhead had entered under his left shoulder blade and torn through a major artery. A wound like that is catastrophic. It would have caused massive internal bleeding. Within minutes, Otzi would have collapsed and bled to death where he fell. This was not an accident, and it was not the weather. Someone had killed him. And the arrow was only the beginning. The more closely scientists looked, the more violent the final days of his life appeared. There was a deep, unhealed cut across his right hand, a classic defensive wound, the kind you get grabbing at a blade in a fight. But that wound had already started to heal, which means it happened a day or two before he died. So Otzi had been in a violent struggle, survived it, and then was hunted down and killed shortly after. He also had a serious injury to the back of his head, from either a heavy blow or a hard fall as he went down. And then there was the blood. Analysis of his gear found the blood of 4 different people, on his knife, on his coat, and on his arrows. From all of this, researchers pieced together his final hours. A day or two earlier, Otzi had been in a fight, badly enough to gash his hand, and maybe to wound others. The 4 blood types suggest he was not alone, and neither was his attacker. He fled high into the mountains, carrying his weapons and his precious axe, climbing to over 3,000 meters. He stopped to rest and even to eat a final meal. He may have believed he had escaped. He hadn't. Someone was still following him. And from behind, at a distance, they raised a bow and let the arrow fly. But here is the detail that turns a killing into a mystery. Otzi's killer never took his belongings. That copper axe, one of the most valuable objects a person could own at the time, was left lying beside his body. This was not a robbery. Whoever did this didn't want his tools. They wanted him dead. And they may have even pulled the arrow's shaft out of the wound to hide the evidence, leaving only the buried stone tip that would betray them thousands of years later. We will never know the killer's name or what drove them up that mountain. A rivalry, a betrayal, a feud. The motive died with them both. But thanks to the ice, Otzi's body kept its secrets for over 5,000 years until science could finally read them. The oldest murder we have ever discovered, solved not by a detective, but by a corpse that refused to disappear. If stories like this fascinate you, subscribe. There is always another mystery buried in the past. Thanks for watching.